Welcome to r/malicious compliance, where we share stories of people conforming to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. Thank you, friends, for subscribing to the channel, and for so many likes. The first story. Couple tried to negotiate a car rental rate, and the customer service representative played a clever game, turning a $250 quote into a $540 bill. The second story. Warehouse's strict no-phone policy led to a costly contract cancellation after an employee's phone refusal, resulting in hundreds of thousands of dollars in losses for the company. The third story. Team devised a clever travel request DDoS led by their supportive manager, Jim, ultimately leading to a temporary halt in the second approver requirement. On to the first story. Want to pay more for your rental? No problem. Cast of characters. Me is me. Customer service representative, CSR. The couple, the duo. I traveled a lot for my job. I work for the government and I'm used to living out of a suitcase and driving rental vehicles. On one trip a few years ago, I flew into a mid-sized airport. I gathered my luggage and made my way to the car rental desks near the parking lot. As the airport was not huge, few people were renting cars at that time. I arrived at the desk and stood in line as the CSR was taking a return from the duo. It appeared that I arrived just as the bill for their rental was being calculated. The CSR looked at me, told me it won't be but a minute. I waved her off as I had no pressing timings to meet. The duo scanned their bill and had some questions. CSR, you rented the luxury car for a week but are returning it after 5 days. It's $75 per day on the daily rate. I'm keeping your rental at the week because it comes to $300 per week. I also added in a voucher knocking off $50 for a promotion, even though it does not cover this class of vehicle. So your total for your rental is $250. I could immediately see what she was doing, knocking off $100 in the cost of this rental to ensure that this couple would return in the future to rent from this agency. In other words, building up customer loyalty. Duo, but you've rented it to use for the week. We only used it for 5 days. We don't want to pay for the week. CSR, I did that because the week-long rental is significantly cheaper than the 5-day rental. Duo, but we did not use it for the whole week. Take the $250 and knock off 2 days worth of rental from that. It occurred to me that what the duo were doing, and they were both speaking at CSR simultaneously, was trying to make their deal very much sweeter by having the weekly rate cut. CSR, if I do that on the system, you'll pay for 5 days, but it'll be more expensive. Duo, you told us we would pay $250, but we only had it for 5 days. CSR, but the 5-day option is much more expensive. It is cheaper to keep the rental at the weekly rate. CSR and Duo go around in circles like this for about another 5 minutes. Finally, Duo, we need to catch our flight. You've wasted enough of our time. Give us the 5-day rate now so we can catch our flight. Your manager will be hearing from us. I saw a look of exasperation on the CSR's face. I would not have had the patience she showed, but I thought I saw a glint of malicious compliance in her eye as she looked down at her keyboard. CSR tapped in the computer, printed a new bill, which they quickly signed. CSR presented a copy to the duo and they took off. I got to the counter, smiled and told her my name, hoping to get on the road. I made a little small talk about what I witnessed and she smiled and said there was a little surprise waiting for them. The duo were immediately over my shoulders wanting to talk to CSR. Duo, what are you trying to pull? CSR, oh, you have a bill for the terms of your rental. Duo, but it's much more expensive than the $250 we were quoted. CSR, that was the weekly rate with promotion. You wanted the 5-day rate. The weekly rate for the luxury car includes automatic insurance, unlimited mileage, and fuel service. The daily rate is $75 per day rental. You add insurance, so that's $18 per day, plus there's a 150-mile-a-day allowance, and you were over that by about 250 miles. And that's at 20 cents per mile. And the fuel service is not available to you, so that's $4.99 per gallon. Finally, the promotion was for week-long rentals in our SUV class, and as you rented neither for a week nor an SUV, you're ineligible. So that makes your bill $540. My jaw dropped, from $250 to $540 just like that. Duo, but we wanted you to use the weekly rate for 5 days. CSR, I told you I could not do that. I tried to give you the best deal I could, but you rejected it. However, I have your signature and this is what you ordered. Now I need to help this gentleman out. Duo, but we have to sort this out right now. We have a flight to catch. CSR, after I help him. Now please step back. The CSR sorted out my rental, but seemed to take her time to ensure I was well looked after. I got upgraded to a mid-size, declined the insurance, but was given fuel service, which I never use. And when I was given the key, the CSR decided she needed to show me where the car was in the parking lot. She told the duo that she would be back. I doubt they were pressed for a flight, and as we calmly walked to the rental. Me, I thought that was brilliant, but are you worried about your manager being angry? CSR. I'm the manager not only for this desk but for the region, and when they call, I'll offer them a $50 voucher for a promotion. In the end, even if they go to corporate, they won't get it down to $250 or the $200 they wanted. They'll still end up with a bigger bill than I offered them. I learned that day, don't try to nickel and dime savings on the back of someone who's already giving you a sweet deal. The personalized customer service was very smart and was able to use the circumstances to their advantage. CSR proved to be a true master in the art of bending the rules and even, one might say, vindictive in her compliance with the terms of the agreement. It responded to similar dominance on the part of the duet, with its own wit and harmoniously executed work. In the end, Duet decided to fight for a discount on their own, and it backfired on them. When the profitability is already provided for you and you shouldn't exaggerate trying to get even more, it's not always possible to get the best deal, and it can turn out to be against you, as in the case of the duo. Sometimes it's better to accept friendly offers, especially when someone's trying to cheat you or win a case. If you receive a good offer, it may be worth analyzing it to see how beneficial it is to you, instead of trying to get an even better deal. The second story is, company doesn't allow me to have my phone, so I cost them $100K plus. I've worked in warehouses for years. A few years back, I was a contractor. Companies would hire us and bring in 20 plus people for a few weeks when they desperately needed help. I was a shift lead, usually the highest person on site, and needed to talk to my boss regularly throughout the day on a company phone. One warehouse had a policy where only managers could have their phone on the floor, and technically I wasn't a manager. Everyone under me was instructed to leave them in their car or a locker. However, I needed mine. One day I was talking on the phone to my boss, and one of the managers for the company we were working for saw me and demanded I hand him my phone, and I refused. He then threatened to kick me out, so I rounded up all my workers and said we're taking a break. We all go outside and I tell my boss what happened. He comes to the site instantly and starts talking to their boss, and tells him I need my phone on the floor, but since I don't have manager in my title, they refuse. So my boss decided I can't do my job, so nobody under me can do theirs either. The end of the day, the other company is peeved we didn't get any work done, and decides to cancel our contract, which cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars because it's written in the contract that they'll have to pay to send us home before the original end date. We all still got paid and got 2 weeks off before having to go somewhere else. The people making these rules don't think about what will actually happen. They should just write people up if they aren't supposed to be using their phone. The best part is they were a year behind schedule when we arrived, caught them up by 6 months in 2 weeks. Then they fired us, and got blacklisted by like 90% of the companies that could come help them, and ended up filing for bankruptcy about a year later. They sure showed us who's in charge. Your boss and your team decided to play around with this restriction in a fun way, and at some point you really managed to show who's boss. Your response to the situation was the best way to demonstrate the absurdity of this restriction. Tip: sometimes it's better to ask for an exception instead of strict adherence to the rules. In your case, if the managers had asked you for an exception instead of demanding the phone, the situation might have ended differently. So if you ever find yourself in a similar situation again, try to discuss a possible exception or argue the benefits to the company that allowing you to use your phone in the workplace can bring. Or you can show them who's boss again. Some companies can lose significant money due to their own judgment and misguided leadership. Instead of following reasonable approaches to work, they chose a more authoritarian path that did not end well for them. The third story is obeying to the letter, aka travel request DDoS. Some years back, I worked for a rather large IT company with the fictional name HAL. In our team, we were and are specialized in a niche field of expertise, and used to travel to customers all the time. Literally, my travel expenses were often higher than my pay. At a stock market listed company like HAL, mistrusting employees is as much company policy as paying below market average. So we had to apply for permission before each single trip we took, which normally our first-line manager Jim had to sign off. And that was it. Jim was a nice guy in his late 40s, spent most of his career with HAL, and at that point also had been manager for quite some years. He had a good feeling for which rules could be ignored or bent, and which ones to better follow to the letter. Jim genuinely cared for his team, and tried to keep us clear of company BS so we could do our actual jobs. Though he was not perfect, to this day he's one of the best direct managers I ever worked for. 1 year, third quarter rolls around, which in stock market companies means middle and upper management become conscious of the unrealistic goals they set for year-end, and try to meet them by cutting spending, with every BS in the book and outside. At one point in time, HAL tried to file for a patent on how to lay off employees. That year, they took aim at travel expenses once again. A few rule changes here and there. The most notable change for us was that travel requests had to be signed off by a second person. A poor devil in Spain whom they promoted to some bogus manager title. Each travel request from Hal's employees all over Europe had to be reviewed and approved by him. We were asked to hand in our requests at least 14 days before starting the trip, preferably earlier than that because there was no stand-in for this guy. Now, as I said, we're experts in a technical niche, which implies a limited number of people who can do the job. Changing travel plans, sometimes in the middle of a trip, to go somewhere else and fix an emergency was part of our daily business. We'd give Jim a short call and go. He had our backs and would find ways to make the paperwork look right. In contrast to the company, he did trust us. Doesn't mean he never checked. Everyone knew the rules. No one deliberately took advantage. And while Jim was indeed a nice guy, he was well able to gently correct or hand out a verbal A-whooping where necessary. Well, with the new rules, changes on short notice were practically impossible. In our next group meeting, we discussed what this meant for us and how to deal with it. Cue Jim's MC. Look, he said I know most of you have already planned out your business trips until the end of the year. We need to ensure our customers get on-site support as defined in the contracts, so I'm asking you to make sure your planned trips are not interfered with by pending travel approvals. Hand them in ASAP and don't forget to fill in the second approver field. Surely one team's travel requests were not enough to make a full-time request approver go into overload. But I guess we were not the only ones handing in as many requests as possible. Maybe even the normal amount would have been enough. After all, they made the poor Spaniard review the whole continent, probably even the whole EMEA region. About 3 weeks later, a follow-up email. The second approver thing gets temporarily paused. To this day, it was never continued. Also, for all the requests I handed in, not one got the second approval. Sad to say for Jim, life wasn't kind. Back then, he and his wife had adopted a baby a few years before. Jim took a sabbatical, planning to spend more quality time with the family before the kid entered school. About that time, it turned out his nagging back pain actually was some form of cancer, in the spine or something. He had to undergo very painful treatment, and I'm told that he hasn't really recovered well since. Our contract faded away years ago. I guess Christmas season, especially this year, is a good time to call him again. As for me, I've long moved on from this job. The guy who showed me the ropes when I started working in that niche, right out of university, is still with Hal. In my current company, we do some business with them. Get to see him from time to time, and it's always nice to catch up. Still hold a lot of respect for that man. Edit. Thing with measurements is, manager turnover rate is extremely high in those companies. Around that time, for Hal, it was said that the average time a manager kept their position was less than 2 years. And I know quite some who've kept their positions for many years, so that says something about those who lower the average. The whole system is focused on short term. Just look at the tantrums they throw for each quarter's results. To make a career, managers need to produce short-term results, and when the consequences hit, they've changed jobs 2 times since. Jim's idea to invite everyone to submit travel requests immediately and try to circumvent the excessive controls was a real masterpiece. As for Jim, it's a real shame that he had to face health issues at such a difficult time. We hope he recovers and can enjoy some quality time with his family. Hope you enjoyed these stories. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel.